Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, first one thereof for the 25th of February 2025. Marmite on toast, check. Sourdough today, posh. Cup of tea, check. Let's get on with some stats. However, I have to say that yet again today, we have a real slim pickings for information concerning what's going on the front line. Everything is being, all the bandwidth is being strangled, as I often say, by the geopolitical information coming out because of everything going on across the pond, really. So this might well be one of the quickest front hits and losses videos I have ever done. Let's go to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can find them in the description to the video below. Right, we have 1,300 personnel on the list, so that's actually ticked up a little bit. Although most of the other categories have come down. 5 tanks, pretty low. 11 troop-carrying AFVs, about half the daily average. 26 artillery systems above the daily average, but less than we've seen over the last week, since that's been a particularly good category for the Ukrainians. They've done a pretty good job of attriting artillery pieces. 2 pieces of anti-aircraft warfare equipment. That's good there. It's frustrating. I haven't seen an Andrew Perpetua loss list for a long time, and I'd love to see what anti-aircraft warfare systems they have on there. We do have an interesting video to come. Fascinating. That was doing the rounds yesterday concerning anti-aircraft systems. Okay, 138 vehicles and fuel tanks. That is a high number there, of course, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So I guess it reflects a slowing down of activity across the front line. On the, I would have thought on behalf of the Russians, they are still pushing in certain areas, of course, where they are having some success. Karakova being one. Pokrovsk seems to have slowed down. They're still pushing in various areas north and trying to push back in Kursk as well. Okay, this is the footage I was talking about. So Ukrainian drone bomber destroyed a rare 9A82 Telar. So that's a transporter, erector, launcher and radar of an S-300V anti-ballistic missile system, and then landed to watch it burn somewhere in Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Fascinating stuff there. Okay, so what else can we say about this? Special Kherson Cat says, destroyed by a heavy night bomber in the Zaporizhzhia front. Quote, just now on the Zaporizhzhia front in the rear, the Russians, our guys, destroyed a fat target. A rather rare launcher. So it's a launcher of the S-300V air defense system. And you can see it there standing up, so it's quite recognizable. People walking around. After the defeat, the drone was landed in order to observe how it burns. 2 Russians from the crew of the system became very interested in what flew to them. They came to look, and as a bonus, 2 died. So interesting. I don't know that we've got that caught there, but 2 people supposedly died in that as well. And you can see there the burning system, which is a really high value target. So that's good news for the Ukrainians there. Okay, now we move on to a research vessel sinking in Novorossiysk. Quite incredible footage here, and actually there's other footage of someone, you know, filming that standing right next to it. You can see it's covered in ice, and actually apparently that's what did it in, really, that the weighting of the ice there unbalanced the boat, and it tipped and went in. But anyway, there you go. That is the although it does look like the whole jetty is on its side, and that could be what's going on there with the fairly rough seas going up against it. I don't know, but anyway, that's a Russian ship in Novorossiysk. That's now where the Black Sea Fleet is mainly sort of berthed, although it's not a very big port, so a lot of them are moored out to sea. Okay, moving on to distant strikes. Another wide-ranging attack last night. We have a huge number of drones sent in to Ukraine, almost a record there. 213 drones. 6 out of 7 KH-101 cruiser missiles were intercepted, so that's fairly good news there, but that does mean 1 got through. 133 out of the 213 drones were shot down. 79 were lost without causing damage. So if we add 80 onto that, and take one off, that means one basically got through. That's an exceptionally good interception rate. The attack targeted several regions, including Kyiv and Zhytomyr. The response involved aviation, air defense, and electronic warfare. So because of the size of that attack and the fact that you got missiles in there as well, there were long air raid alerts and whatnot. You can see heaps of the public here lined up waiting for public transport and whatnot in the morning. The alarms being turned off at 8:30 in the morning continues to affect lives for people in Kyiv. Public transport resumes and everyone heads there at once, causing more danger. This first video shows queues just to get to Chernihiivsk metro station in the capital. And then when you go to the metro stations, they were heaving as well. Second video is from inside another metro station, Kyiv. London's tube can be bad, but never quite this bad in my experience. So absolutely ran there, and that's going to be probably as a result of people all coming in because they weren't able to get in on the early trains because of the air raid alerts, and also probably a lot of people in there getting protection, as metros are fairly common places for people to hide themselves away from the munitions. And that's really all I have on strikes. I mean, yet again, pretty quiet on the Ukrainian front, as in the Ukrainians striking into Russia. I didn't hear anything overnight, and this week has been relatively quiet, which has quite surprised me. Moving on to other bits and pieces, we're going to start with PS01, referring to Evgen Istribin, who often gives economic analyses of what's going on in Russia. PS01 says, we have to see if the trend reverses broadly, because if it does, Russia will have no army. So what's he talking about? Well, Istribin says, in the Samara region, payments to new recruits have been reduced by 1.5 million rubles. Now, instead of 4 million rubles, you receive 2.5 million rubles, which is 2.1 million of a local payment of 400,000 from the MOD. In other words, they are stopping paying people so much money. Now, I guess there could be one of two things going on here. Add to this if you have any other ideas. So one is that they're running out of money, so they're cutting that back. Maybe three things, actually. Two, they're slowing down, thinking there will be a peace deal soon. That's one I hadn't considered. Or three, they're actually going the other way and getting ready for a mass national mobilization, which will force people into the armed forces, and therefore you don't need to spend so much on trying to attract them voluntarily. I don't know. Interesting that has changed. Now, according to the United States, this is in Axios, but it's being reported in a number of places, Ukraine and the US are close to signing a deal on minerals worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, it's worth mentioning that some of these claims are coming from, say, Trump himself, when he's quite bombastic with, say, for example, Emmanuel Macron yesterday in the Oval Room in the White House. That was an incredible interaction, wasn't it? Where at the beginning, Macron was being very kind and very flattering to Trump, sort of brown-nosing Trump to get on his side. But then when Trump spouted a lie, it was really interesting. So Macron called him out publicly. That would have really annoyed Trump. He got called out publicly and got fact-checked by Emmanuel Macron. But the reaction from Trump was to then repeat the lie straight away after he was fact-checked. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, Trump is just a liar. And that is that. It is evident from that interaction that he's a liar. Lie, fact-checked, repeat the lie. But yeah, interesting interaction. According to the draft obtained by Axios, the US would express its desire to keep Ukraine free, sovereign, and secure. There's obviously been a lot of work on this, and I'm never quite sure where we're at, because I keep seeing references to people having seen the draft and saying it's absolute garbage and doesn't do Ukraine any good, and then the claims that actually Ukraine are close to signing it, which would indicate that it must be somewhat acceptable to Ukraine. And I wonder at what stage we're at, whether Ukraine has made an awful lot of amendments that will be beneficial to Ukraine. And then the question is, well, will they be acceptable to the US? It's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. Now, there are two things to add to this, because first of all, we have Russians being very angry with Putin after all of his quotes concerning doing sort of deals with the Americans himself. Zeb Patriots on Telegram write that he is selling Russia and they don't want what their boys fought for. Most frequent emoticons in Telegram are the laughing emoji and the clown emoji. And this is talking about, obviously, Putin. Get on all fours in front of the Americans. And obviously you can see what that metaphor is all about, so that we would be clear whose side you are on, like you did when you kissed the Quran. If you remember, famously, Putin went and kissed the Quran in, where was that? Was it in Chechnya or Dagestan? I can't remember. But showing your commitment to Islam and migrants and not to the Russian people. So that didn't go down too well with some Russians. Our guys fought so that you could take the land. Did he hand over Donbass to the Americans for mining? So within the rare earth deal, there's no doubt going to be agreements over the occupied territories of Ukraine that the Russians presently occupy, because that's where a lot of these rare earth minerals and resources are. And that would require doing a deal with Russia as well. And the Russians here, the actual soldiers and people on the ground, are saying, hang on, what are we doing giving away everything that we fought and died for so the Americans can make a bunch of money? And then, fascinatingly, we hear today that the EU has now offered Ukraine a mutually beneficial minerals deal, despite Trump saying the US version is close to signing. Now, this, by all accounts, is one that is not so extortionate. They are not trying to extort Ukraine, and they're trying to make it as mutually beneficial as possible, which would make a lot more sense if you were, I don't know, nice people. The European Commissioner for Industrial Strategy, Stéphane Séjourné, said he had offered Kyiv an alternative to that proposed by the US. Séjourné, was he not the foreign minister in the previous French government? The EU is trying to outbid Trump on a Ukrainian minerals deal, says Michael Weiss. A European spine is forming, and the Stratcom Centre says a European Union has proposed that Ukraine conclude a mutually beneficial deal for access to critical resources on more favourable terms than the version currently offered by the US. According to European Commissioner Stéphane Séjourné, 21 out of the 30 critical minerals needed by Europe could be provided by Ukraine as part of a mutually beneficial partnership. Quote, the added value of Europe is that we will never ask for an agreement that is not mutually beneficial. And that's really pointed against the US, that apparently is asking for something that clearly benefits the US, overwhelmingly. The thing is, though, there are certain things that only the US can provide in terms of assistance. And so Ukraine really want the US on side, even if it means that this mineral deal is post hoc paying for stuff that has been given. Like, it's not guaranteeing anything going forward. They just need to keep the US on side, and that is a price possibly that the Ukrainians are willing to pay. And that's not something that Europe, they can offer a much better deal. No doubt this deal should be, if you're just only looking at deals, ceteris paribus, all other things remaining the same, you're just looking at these two deals, you choose the EU deal, I'm sure. Right, I'm just speculating, but I'm sure that's going to be the case. But it's not just about the deal, right? It's about what the deal enables from the US. And even if that's really minimal in terms of actual tangible stuff, it's keeping the US on side. And keeping the US on side is much more important than the EU being on side, because they are already on side and they will continue to be on side. And indeed, there's been a statement about this deal, something along the lines of, we're not expecting anything back in the way that the US is. We'll continue giving you aid type thing. And so that is That's a leverage that the US have, really, is we're not going to help you unless you do this. Whereas the EU is like, do this deal, it's a better deal, but we're still going to help you because we're nice people and it's in our best interests. Whereas it's still in the US's best interest, but Trump doesn't really realize that because he's very, very immediately transactional. Now, there are rumours that there's going to be further talks in Riyadh today between the US and Russia. There are rumours coming out of the US to this effect. The Russians have just come out through TASS and denied this. That doesn't mean it won't be happening. Just there's a formal denial. But yeah, there might be talks today in Riyadh between those two nations again, over the heads of Ukraine, about Ukraine, without Ukraine. Now, the Moscow Stock Exchange continues to rise after Putin's statements on rare earths and possible cooperation with the US. So Putin has also come out and said, hey, we've got loads of rare earth metals as well. We're open for business. Obviously, he's trying to attract everyone back in. And if that happens, that's basically the end of sanctions against Ukraine. We're hearing that South Korea may have started to lift their sanctions against Ukraine in the sphere of medical equipment. But yeah, so it's annoying that everything the US appears to be doing at the moment is to the benefit of Russia and not to the benefit of Ukraine. And don't get me started on the UN statement yesterday that the US didn't. So not only did they vote against that, along with their mates North Korea and Russia, but China abstained. Even China abstained. The US voted against that, and then they put their own statement in to get voted on. That got amended by European nations, and the US didn't vote on their own statement because of these positive amendments by Europe. It's just absolute chaos. Not just chaos, it's that absolute moral... it's morally vacuous of the US to do that. Not even vacuous. It's not emptiness. It's morally bad. It's just really, really bad that the US has now sided with North Korea. I can't believe it. And just to remind you what's actually going on, this is Vovchansk. Vovchansk, that's a settlement that so well at the beginning of the war resisted the Russians, people standing against tanks, I think, and stuff there. And this is Vovchansk now. That's what liberation looks like. That's what the Russians are doing. And the Americans refuse to see these people as aggressors. It's unconscionable. And I reported on this the news piece, because actually it was in Greek news, and then it started to be reported in mainstream media in around the world, that there is this US base supposedly in Greece that the US are being pulled out, the US are pulling out from. That has been denied by Trump, although Trump didn't really know anything about it either way. He had to ask Senator Rubio. Rubio sort of denied it, and then Trump said it's fake news type thing. It's not a true story. But there's a lot of confusion there because Turkey and Russia have said that the Americans are. But anyway, it appears to have been maybe a bit of psyops from the other side. But it's interesting when I have like pro-Ukrainian, pro-Trump people on my threads picking out that story and say, oh, you got that wrong. Well, actually, no, it's just reporting what other mainstream outlets are reporting. Oh, you got that wrong. But then remaining silent on the fact that the US has voted with North Korea and with Russia in the UN. So don't come at me at this and like ignore that. You need to explain that. That's morally reprehensible. And you need to explain it if you are a massive fan of Donald Trump and his administration and what they're doing for Ukraine. Because voting with Russia and voting with North Korea, I don't think this has been accentuated enough. Actually, it has. British media, Newsnight were all over it last night. This is freaking terrible. Anyone who's out there that's supportive of the American administration at the moment, you bloody well have to work hard to justify that or accept that that is morally reprehensible. Answers down below, please, because it's not cool. What was nice was that European leaders, Canadian leaders, allied leaders came together in support of Ukraine. In Ukraine, obviously the Americans were absent because they were too busy voting against Ukraine in the United Nations. But this was lovely with... I'm going to get into trouble for this. And this is Pierre. Pierre's done this to me. This is, was it Hero of the Motherland? statue. We affectionately call her Tintits because she's metal and very big, and yeah, I know it's not good. Anyway, that's Pierre's fault, and now I can't get it out of my head, and that's basically every time I see the statue, that's what I call her. But an absolutely incredible statue. I was there with the team out there, and it's so impressive and overlooks Kyiv in a really majestic way. And it's great to see those leaders come together to support Ukraine. And I'm going to leave you with this, just because there's a bit of a lack of information today. I just think this is a lovely sentiment here. This is a picture up in some office somewhere. Quote, and this is a Zelensky speech, his inaugural speech actually, when he won office in 2019. Quote, I do not want my picture in your offices. The president is not an idol, an icon, or a portrait. Hang your kids' photos instead and look at them each time you are making a decision. What a lovely, lovely thing to say. Not the sort of thing a dictator would say, right? I bet Trump loves seeing his picture, just as we see pictures of Vladimir Putin and King Jong-un all over the countries in which over which they preside. But I love that from Zelensky there. I do not want my picture in your offices. The president is not an idol, an icon, or a portrait. Absolutely, you should live by that. And I think we're seeing, unfortunately, that's not the case for many supporters of the president in the United States, where he appears to be the king, the law, the constitution. Hang your kids' photos instead and look at them each time you're making a decision, because you are making a decision on behalf of your children for the future of your country. Absolutely. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, guys. Speak soon. Toodle pips.